President Trump making his pitch to minority voters ahead of 2020.
Our opponents have abandoned African Americans, and they have. They've abandoned. Before the election, they start courting the African American. The election is over, and then they leave them. We did just the opposite. What we've done for Hispanic, for African American, for minorities, what we've done is unprecedented.
Well, our next guest, a lifelong Democrat, agrees and says there's an awakening going on among black voters.
And here to explain it is CEO of the Brewer Group and former NFL player Jack Brewer. Hi, Jack.
Good morning.
How's it going? Good morning.
Great.
So, Jack, you had previously campaigned for former President Obama, and now you support President Trump. What was that moment that made the shift or caused that shift in support?
For me, it was, once I saw the policies that President Obama pushed in the back half of his presidency, just kind of, it left a bad taste in my mouth. And then, I really started being awakening to what was happening with the Democratic Party, making so many promises, but then abandoning the community that I work so hard in. I work with kids that are underserved throughout the country and just try to help them. And then you see that, the Democratic parties are actually the ones that were locking them up. The 1994 crime bill, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton pushing this rhetoric onto our country and just taking fathers out of the homes of black families across America. I said enough was enough, and I really started, putting aside what my parents and grandparents taught me about sticking to the Democratic Party because they were the party for African Americans. All that rhetoric sounded good back in the 60s, but the facts is the policies just don't help our families.
Jack, it's interesting that we have this segment this morning. Last night I'm walking down the street in New York City. A young African American man comes up to me and says, "I'm supporting President Trump 2020. He says, "I know you work at Fox. I want you to know there's a lot of us out here who support him." And I wonder, how do you sort out? Is that just anecdotal here and there, or is this going to be something you can actually get your arms around, that there's going to be a shift in 2020 where there's more black support for the president than the pundits think?
I call it the Black Awakening. I think President Trump can get over 20% of this vote. When you watch what's going on with this impeachment, I think this is the catalyst. Since their beginning in 1908, the FBI has gone after so many black activists. Even up to last year, they had the black identity focus for the FBI. And you're talking about, Democrats that send messages talking out of both sides of their mouth because they don't stand up against this corruption. You got the FBI blatantly going after the president and targeting him, changing emails and going after him in the same corrupt way that they went against Martin Luther King and many black leaders.
And can you answer that for me? Because you, in a Washington Times interview, you had said that impeachment and the FBI's abuse of power, it makes black voters more sympathetic to President Trump. Why is that?
Because they've gone after us since the beginning of time. Government agencies have gone against blacks that they feel that are threats. Blacks standing up, like myself for poor black Americans. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. marched for jobs and freedom. You go back and see that was his push. And that's exactly what this president is delivering. You got record low unemployment for black Americans. You have a president that has pushed the First Step Act that has brought so many black fathers back into the house. 77% of black kids are born with no father in the house. And a lot of that has to do with our incarceration policies, with our deep-rooted cultural issues that have been pushed upon us from the media. You got our kids listening to rap music that is getting them hyped up to go rob and steal from people. So we have some deep issues in America, but President Trump is not our issue. I don't agree with everything that President Trump says. I don't agree with how he says some things, but that does not mean that I'm going to deny his policies, right? Sometimes you got to pick policies over personality.
All right. Jack Brewer with some blunt talk today. We appreciate you coming in.
God bless you guys.
Thanks, Jack. You too.